Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gina Rosenberg, and today is Tuesday, April 7th. And today we're going to be looking at The Moon is Down, Chapter 6 in detail. So before we read Chapter 6, I want you guys to focus on a couple of different ideas. First of all, I'm actually going to look at the second question. How does Steinbeck humanize the invaders? How does he humanize the invaders? And he was actually highly criticized as an author for humanizing the Nazis in this particular text. Because remember, it was written for the purpose of propaganda to show the democratic governments or people that they would prevail or how to prevail. But yet he does actually humanize the invaders as well. And then let's look at the other question. Why do people resist? Why do they resist? What is the fundamental motive for resistance? So why are they resisting? So that's what I want you guys to look at as you read Chapter 6. Now, also before the reading, there's actually two new characters going to be introduced in Chapter 6, which is strange because the book is almost over. But these two characters, they're brothers, and Tom and Will Anders are fishermen, and they become very important in this particular chapter for what they're instructed to do for the town's people. So I want you to notice them as well. Okay, now I'm going to have you pause the video in just a second and read Chapter 6. Remember to complete your reading guide using that SOAR method and turn it into Google Classroom. Everyone seems to be getting pretty good at this system now. You are remembering to press the turn in button for your Google Classroom. And as you notice, I am grading them in Google Classroom and returning them and then uploading your scores to Veracross. So at this time, if you would, please pause the video, read Chapter 6, and come back in about 20 minutes to start the video with me again. Okay, so now you should have read Chapter 6. There's three things that I want to go back and look at in Chapter 6. These are some three key ideas. The first one is that snow imagery. Now, we talked a little bit about that in Chapter 5, but I didn't go into great detail. So I'm going to show you what I feel that the imagery of the snow is actually representing. Then number two, we're going to talk about humanizing the enemy. Enemy. And Lieutenant Tonder in particular on pages 74 to 78 is a great example of this. And then third, Molly's actions. And what does Mayor Orden encourage the people to do in page 82 to 86? So we're going to look at that as well. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to Chapter 6 so that we can look at the text together. All right, let me turn my highlighter on. Okay. So again, we're going to first look at how does Steinbeck actually humanize the invaders? And we're going to look at the resistance and also going to look at that imagery of the snow. So if you look at Chapter 6 in the very first paragraph here, we see reference to the snow. And it says, the snow was beaten down on the walks and in the street, but it piled high on the fences and it puffed on the roof peaks. So if you notice, the more snow is kind of representative of the resistance. Okay, so the more that it snows and the more the snow is piling up, it's sort of representative of the town resisting against the soldiers. And so we see that, a picture of that here. Also, if you look again at page, let's turn a couple more pages. On page 72, we see another reference to the snow or the weather. It says, the soldiers brought back winter early. My father always said a war brought bad weather or bad weather brought a war. I don't remember which. So again, it's representative of that winter, and the snow is the resistance. Okay, now as we move on into the chapter, on chapter 70 or page 74, we're going to see Lieutenant Tonder and how he has been humanized by Steinbeck. And again, remember, Steinbeck was really criticized for doing this, for actually humanizing the enemy. So he is going to have a conversation with Molly. Molly is a single woman who he finds to be beautiful, and he is going to have a conversation with her. He is seeking out a relationship with her. Okay, and Tonder says to Molly, I've seen you in the town and I know you're lovely and I know I want to talk to you. And she says, why, you're lonely. It's simple as that, isn't it? And so they're kind of flirting back and forth here. Okay, so they're flirting. And we see that Lieutenant Tonder is human in that he has a desire for a woman and a desire for a relationship, and that he is in fact lonely. So he doesn't sound like a machine here. He sounds like a man. Also, we see that Molly is almost sympathetic toward Tonder, is that she is feeling for him and maybe even considering having a relationship or seeing him as human. Then, if you can move on to page 76, they begin to flirt even more. So he winds up reading her a poem, and she kind of catches him, and knowing that she says, did you write this, Lieutenant? He says, yes. But then she says to me, and he says, yes. And she understands that he didn't write it actually. So they're sort of flirting again back and forth. It's a flirtatious conversation here. And she is considering having this relationship. Lieutenant even talks about it a little bit more in this paragraph over here. He says, a man dies without love. His insides shrivel and his chest feels dry, like a dry chip. I'm lonely. So again, he's humanized here. He's a lonely man. He wants a relationship. He's a person, not a machine, and he misses that human connection and human interaction. So as you continue on to page 78, he says, you didn't ask to be my enemy. I'm only a man, not a conquering man. So we've met other conquering mans, like the captain, some of the other soldiers that we've had. But Lieutenant Tonder is specifically saying that I didn't want to be your enemy. You didn't ask to be my enemy. We are people, and we are not meant to be in this fight. He also says we have some right to life in all the killing. So he's saying we need to have that human connection. All right, as you continue on page 82, we now see that there is a plan that the town has for resistance. Okay, so at first they don't really have any guns or way to fight. So they're resisting very silently and subtly. But now we see that these two fishermen who have been introduced are actually have a boat, and they can get out of town and go get help. Okay, so Mayor Orden is actually encouraging resistance in the town. And he says, revenge against a traitor. The people are angry and they have no way to fight back. But it's all in little terms. It's the people against people, not idea against idea. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. He said, I think all invaded people want to resist. We are disarmed. Our spirits and bodies aren't enough. The spirit of a disarmed man sinks. We want to fight them and we can't. And so he is instructing the boys, you boys, these are the new characters, the fishermen, will listen to you, but tell them from us, a small town, to give us weapons. So he's sending them out to get weapons, the brothers or the fishermen. And then he says here, this is no honorable war. This is a war of treachery and murder. And so let us use methods that have been used. Let us use the methods that have been used on us. So Mayor Orden here is instructing the people what to do and how to take a more active resistance. Now, the whole time that this is happening, Molly is actually listening to this conversation. She's the one that Lieutenant Tonder has made a pass toward and is flirtatious toward. So she's been listening to all of this conversation. And then he continues to say that there are still men in power who do not dare to put weapons in the hands of the common people. So he is really wanting to, Orden is saying, I hadn't thought of that. We can only see if such people, tell them we must have help. We must get it. If we get it, we'll help ourselves. So he's saying, hey, you've got to go to the town. You've got to ask for weapons, and we need to fight. Okay, if we turn to the very last page of the chapter, Molly again has been listening to Mayor Orden, and Mayor Orden's been basically a call to what to do, that we must use what we have to resist. So all of a sudden, the Lieutenant Tonder comes back to Molly, and Molly is thinking about this, and her burden was heavy on her. So she's like, what can I possibly do to resist? So at first she had been sympathetic toward the lieutenant, but now we see, after listening to Mayor Orden, she feels she needs to do something for the greater good. So she looks around her and she sees a pair of scissors. So slowly she raises the shears and places them inside her dress. And she says, I'm coming, Lieutenant, I'm coming. And we can understand that at the end of this chapter, Molly stabs and kills Lieutenant Tonder, because she thinks, I have the will and the means to kill, so she justifies her actions, and she winds up killing him. Okay, so I'm going to go back really quickly to the chapter here, the chapter slides. And I want you guys to look at, on page 83, there is a quote by Mayor Orden. He says, it's the people against people, not idea against idea. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that particular notion, because Molly, again, is listening to him give this speech. And even though she's sympathetic toward Lieutenant Tonder and she sees him as human, she's beginning to see us as human, she is actually going to rise up against him because of the ideas, not because of the person. So I would probably take up and disagree with Mayor Orden on this particular case, because Molly then stabs Lieutenant Tonder at the end of the chapter, and she justifies her action and choice to kill him because she's justifying it based on that democratic ideal is more important than the person of Lieutenant Tonder. Okay, so there is no discussion post for today. And today I have office hours every time I post. So if you have questions about what you're doing, from 2 to 3 o'clock, this is not mine here. So from 2 to 3 o'clock, you can come in and Zoom with me, and we can have a conversation or discuss this further. But you do not have a discussion post. The only thing that you do have due is that SOAR worksheet. So make sure that you get that done and turn that in for chapter 6. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you later.